Thank you very much. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I'm happy that I have one more time the opportunity to be with the dear brothers and sisters of Ahlul Bayt Islamic Society of New England and ZIC MIT Shia Muslim Association. I also congratulate the occasion of the day, the birthday of Hazrat Zainab alayhi salam. As Dr. Musalai said, this is the fifth lecture of the lecture series titled Hikmah, Wisdom in the Qur'an. Today's title will be Wisdom and the Positive Law, Qanun Tashri'i, and we are going to see the issue related to Prophet David alayhi salam as a wise judge, and the next lecture we will see another dimension of wisdom related to Qanun Tashri'i or positive law. Positive here means posited in comparison and contrast to natural law, as we discussed in the third lecture. And this is about is the implementation and also is philosophy behind it or understanding of it. As usual in this series of lectures, I will start with reciting this verse, which is also the motivation for also this whole lecture series too. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم يؤتي الحكمة من يشاء ومن يؤتى الحكمة فقد أوتي خيرا كثيرا وما يذكر إلا أولو الألباب. He grants wisdom to whomever he wishes, and he who is given wisdom is certainly given an abundant good, and none takes admonition except those who possesses intellect. So last lecture we were discussing let me go. I mean, as I said, the previous lectures, maybe for those who's attending this lecture for the first time, that much of our discussion will be following the thesis by Dr. Saqib Hussain, Wisdom in the Quran. In Quran, there are 19 verses, but 20 instances the word hikmah is used. This is the order that appearing in the Musaf Usmani, the Qurans we have. In the first lecture, we categorized them in 4 categories, depending on hikmah given to previous prophets, hikmah revealed to our prophet, and hikmah to the non-prophets, and 4 primary duty of the prophet, which among them is teaching hikmah. But then chronological order, at least we go to different ordering of the revelation. Chronologically, we see the earliest instance of the word hikmah in the Quran was Surah 54, Qamar, which the verses 4 we will discuss last lecture. Today we are going to see the Surah Sad, the second on the list, Surah 38, and verse 20 of this surah is specifically of our interest. So the last week was hikmah revealed to the prophet or related to the prophet. This one is hikmah given to previous prophets. And actually it is said in some of the Sha'n nuzuls that maybe Sa'd was immediately revealed after Qamar, which it could be. There are some similarities, some themes, complementarity, but I'm not going to go through that. But you know, they are both middle Meccan, but even they say they really were back to back. That's a possibility which I'm not going to discuss. But from what we have from previous lecture, I will come back to the verses of this lecture. There is something left, or at least something new. I get some idea about it, but then I checked and something important. Look, the issue, really the important issue was the first verse last lecture. We went through it. So I'm discontinuing this first half an hour is continuation previous lecture. So we are talking about Surah al-Qamar, Surah 54. And then you see the first verse is that Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, اقتربت الساعة وانشق القمر. The hour has drawn near and the moon is split. Is the understanding of this انشق القمر. As we said, majority of commentators, based on some hadiths which are recorded, I will come back to a little bit to them later on. That's actually the topic discussion, recorded in different hadith books, not necessarily history books. It came to the understanding that انشق القمر refers to a miracle by Prophet Muhammad that sometime during the Mecca period, when he was discussing or inviting mushrikeen to Islam, they were not accepting his validation, they challenging him, they request a sign or miracle, and one of those nights, some people said this, okay, maybe have been middle of Zul-Hajjah, 14 or 15 of Zul-Hajjah, they were in Mena, some details are there. Prophet split the moon in two parts. And then even one guy added, I see one part of the moon, this side of the Mount Abu Qubais, the other side of Mount Abu Qubais, which is the mountain Mecca. And then Prophet get them to bear witness the splitting, and then after that the moon was rejoined. And this is the most accepted by the commentators, including Allama Tabatabai, Aghay Javadi Amuli, and Sunni, and nearly all majority of Sunni and other Shia scholars. But from earliest times, there were some people which did not understand this like this. So remember, so those people say, if even although the verbs used in this verse are apparently past tense, but although we discussed that the tense in Arabic is not as sharp, in the Semitic languages, not sharp as defined as in the European languages like Farsi and English. So there are lots of grammar behind it. But they say, although this apparently both اقتربت and shaqqa are used in past tense, but these are really referring to event in future and near end of times. And this in okay, nobody had doubt that Sa'at refers to the events of end of times, because other verses of the Quran and a general understanding. So it says, it's kind of, we discussed it last lecture too, so I don't want to go all of it. So this is a understanding that end of times, I mean, either personally or really for the whole human civilization. There are some hadiths also written Prophet that he's the last prophet and close to end of time. So that اقتربت الساعة is no dispute. But in Shaq al-Qamar, I mean, some people say, no, this hasn't happened. This will happen in the future. But there is Quran sometimes use these verbs in the form of past tense, but even is the future, because to emphasize the certainty of this event. And then, so essentially, you go at the future farther than the future of a discussion, which will come sometime, and you look back to this future, which is haven't come, what will be in your past, and Quran is looking from that past, looking, and now is using a past tense, because God kind of time is the same for God. So in that sense, this is emphasized for certainty. And this we have, for example, Surah Al-Qaf, we showed some verses are like that, and some other places in the Quran, and we have also in the Hebrew scripture this situation. So, and as I wrote the summary for the lecture too, there have been historically commentators or some companions believe in this. Hassan al-Basri, it seems, or other people, there are a few. And from modern commentators, Leopold Assad, Muhammad Assad, again, actually Muhammad Assad also believed in this, or support this kind of view. So, okay, looking to the verse, there is nothing against it, but with the next, there were three arguments come against that, which we discussed this. So what I'm saying, the second view is that this Inshaq al-Qamar is the type of events hasn't happened, is happening near the time of Sa'at. And this Inshaqa will be future event, although the verb is used past tense, but is emphatic future, which is definitely certain. Do not doubt about it. There will be a time this will be in past behind you. I mean, like, okay. So this is the view, but the criticism which was leveled against this view was both Allama Tabatabai and also Saghib Hussein, which Saghib Hussein and some aspects like this interpretation, but okay, criticize it. The first one is he used, which is maybe not the strongest, when first Quran hasn't used in Shaqqa or um, regarding or with Qamar regarding even end of times. Okay, that's maybe not the strongest, but the one he emphasized usually those when you're talking even end of times like Surah Al-Takfir or other ones, when you're referring to the events of end of times, you usually have as at the beginning, but that's not necessarily as the Shams Kubarat or Nujum Kaddarat, stuff like that. So that as is not there because as is also a time marker or event marker. But I think the strongest argument, the one which Allama Tabatabai also emphasized, is the next verse. That when you read the next verse, so the first verse was the hour has drawn near and the moon is split. And then it says, if they see a sign, they turn away and say an incessant magic. So it makes more sense when you use this second verse and criticizing the unbeliever. You have brought them a sign. They have seen a sign. Despite observation, that sign, which in Yaro Ayatan, if they see a sign, is referring to it, again, these guys are turning away and then saying this is incessant magic. They must have seen something and so reacting and call this incessant magic. Now, and then Allama says, if it is hereafter or near end of times, and if I mean every we kind of the unseen has gone away, so it doesn't make sense this kind of sentences, this kind of things said to them, and they reply يَقُولُونَ سَحْرٌ مُسْتَمَرٌ, is not end of times or after that. It doesn't make sense. But generally, I mean, if not going this much in detail, I mean, Sarah was saying also agree, and I agree. Look, it doesn't make sense. It's better, although I think still you can disconnect verse 1 and 2 and uh, and and say, okay, verse 1 is one thing and verse 2 is saying something else. But really, I think it's better to see them in connection with them. At least the first instance, you have to think like that. So it seems this cannot be an event in future. I mean, so grammar or Arabic or those are not a problem, but shouldn't be even in the future. Then you have Western scholarship, Angelica Neuwirth, Uri Rubin, or Richard Bell, and even Saghib Hussein himself. They accept this is events happen in past, happened in the time of Prophet, and it was seen by the people, so it's not future, it's not hereafter. But maybe because of the reductionist view, the historical critical modern view has, and kind of by default put any miracle aside, they say, okay, this Inshaq al-Qamar is related to partial eclipse. And not full eclipse, which maybe Quran used the word khasafa or khusuf, the root of khasafa, but partial eclipse. And if you look to the picture of partial eclipse, which I had it last time, if I can find it, you would see, look, these are really astronomy. So the total, although the whole moon is black, but it's become reddish, you see it. The penumbral is a shadow, usually maybe not noticing, unaided or untrained eye may not notice it, that the brightness of this part has been reduced because it's going to the half shadow of the earth, not full shadow. But when this part of the moon goes to whole shadow of the earth, you can say it's broken. It is something taken away. It's like a cookie cut or taken away. So that's possible. The word inshaqqa has been used, but nobody searched to find whether this word was being used in different. I mean, I couldn't do that research too. That's still a possibility. Whether in any other Semitic language, because this can go to Babylonian. This is a very old thing. The Akkadian or other languages, even Sumerian, although this root is Semitic. See whether it is happening. But can happen for a few hours. You think moon has two parts, and one part of it is lost. Then it come back and like something broken, like a plate is broken, a cookie broken, but okay, then you could do it. So this Khusuf, the lunar eclipse, is not much without basis. So we discussed this all, and Saddam Hussein argued for that, and then there is some other reason why he do that. Now, but the point is that the group which believed on miracle, which is the dominant group in the last, for a long time, much of it was based on hadiths. And I give the gist of the hadiths, but we will go through that. For now, I think it's good we read some hadiths a little bit, but then this is the part we are going to open some questions, which these hadiths, honestly, I started to when reading them. I never had read them in this focus, because also this is not necessarily related to the Hikmah, which is verse 5, but it's a little bit changes the whole sense of Hikmah, and that's in the work of Saddam Hussein was important. If it is a natural phenomena like partial eclipse, which the third group wants, this is the type of wisdom we saw in other places in Quran, and some of the I show you some examples. It's some of those wisdom books of the previous traditions which we mentioned them, and then the book which I'm going to a little bit show, First Enoch, as some interesting examples. But Quran have a lot. Invite people to look to the nature, to reflect on it, to see the seasons, the growth of the plants or other events, to kind of get the lessons from it. And then this again matches with because we don't have time to go through that some people also prefer to say there is a trend that people say Prophet Muhammad didn't have any miracle except Quran, which Allah actually does not argue with this, have a discussion about miracles, but it's a little bit different angle. But maybe Prophet has miracles, or I'm not against that. I'm not against per se miracles. Other prophets have, and Prophet Muhammad, why not? But the problem is this example of a miracle? That's kind of, I'm now maybe start to raise some question. And then maybe the other second or third interpretation works. But if we go with and then because we dispute this is an ayah which they hadn't seen, and is end of time, so we maybe have to go toward the partial eclipse. And partial eclipse makes, although this Hikmatul Balagha is larger here, if you look, because it's a لَقَدْ جَاءَهُم مِّنَ الْأَنْبَاءِ مَا فِيهِ مُزْدَجَرٌ. So it's not just this انشق القمر is the Hikmatul Balagha, or Hikmatul Balagha should be derived from انشق القمر. It's coming from the totality of the message. They have already come to them reports containing admonishment. But again, it seems looking to these ayats and not stubbornly rejecting what is inside you, what you really feel, and extracting information is part of the wisdom, or part of the we said the wisdom which is independent of scripture people can have. So that's this line, but that one I'm not too much maybe discussing, but I a little bit, let's see the hadiths, and then we'll come back here and I show some example, one Enoch, and then hopefully we can go to the other new section. Okay, so just let's see some of the hadiths. So let me skip this one. Okay, skip this one, and then I go to Surah al-Qamar. So Dr. Masali, are you seeing the Tafsir al-Mizan? It says chapter 54.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. I'm going to read a couple of hadiths because I didn't do it last time. We're saving time, but now because this is important, the hadith. So let's see. I have to emphasize, except most of these hadiths from Sunni sources, and not going to the Imams mostly, although we have to discuss, but there are some exceptions. Although even the coming Shia books, I looked at Tafsir Burhan too, but we'll see a little bit more discussion. We'll see, make it big. So, for example, in Tafsir Qumi about the first verse, the hour has drawn near, we read the resurrection is imminent. For there is nothing after the messenger of God except the resurrection, and both prophethood and messengership have come to an end. And as for the part of the verse, and the moon is the split, the Quraysh had asked the messenger of God to show them a sign, so he invoked God to split the moon in two halves so that they might see it clearly. But when he did, they said an insensate magic, meaning a genie and magic. So it's kind of repeating the content of the verse. Maybe let me see a little bit longer one. Yeah, let's see this one. Because we see, this is Dor al-Mansud, Sunni book. Amali of Sheikh al-Saduq, it is taking it to Imam Reza, but these all can be discussed. But let's see this one, typically from Ibn Masud, this is the most common one. So in the same source, Durr al-Mansur, Ibn Jarir, Ibn al-Munzir, Ibn Mardawayh, Ibn Naim, Ibn Bayhaqi, both of them from Dalail, relate via Masruq from Ibn Mas'ud. The moon split during the time of Prophet, but the Quraysh said this is a sorcery of Ibn Abi Kabsha. Wait and see the word the Safar tribe bring you, for Muhammad cannot bewitch all humankind. The Safar tribe came, the people asked them about it, and they said, yes, we saw it too. Whereat God sent down the verses, the hour has drawn near and the moon split. Look, it seems there were questions from the same time, and one of the things is that this splitting of the moon is a big thing, and maybe some part of the earth was they do not see it, but look, full moon is the middle of the month and is out all night, is all night, and if it splits, everybody is contrary to other moon, early moon, other ones set soon, but this comes near sunset and is there to sunrise. And then if it split, really, it's very probable other people seeing it. And then they really, if we, I mean, the hadith is very powerful. I mean, you cannot doubt in the content of it. That at early stage, at early instance, that look, they noticed, okay, those Quraysh said, okay, maybe he reach us because we are close to him, somehow change our mind. But the people which are coming on the way, for example, this Safar tribe, they're coming to Mecca, let's ask them. And they also say we saw it. There are always the questions, scientific questions. Okay, this splitting the moon is not simple thing related to the tides, whether have some leftover effect on the moon. But if it's really miracle that level, maybe those also are covered. But okay, these are the typical hadiths. I don't want to go through that. But I had personally got some questions of, let's see, guys. Yeah. That these hadiths, when you read them, especially you go to Tafsir Burhan, which is a collection of them, I feel they were all similar. And then I had some question and asked some friend whether somebody has worked on this. And then luckily I sent some people, they said yes, some I'm sorry, do you see this Farsi article now?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So I asked, and then people kindly send me this article by Amir-Hasan Khorvash. He's very young. I think they said to me 22, 23. This is not published, but as you can see, it's 66 pages and full, very good literature review, especially in Farsi, Arabic, and then some English, and then have gone to all the hadiths. And the main conclusion is this. The main conclusion, really most or nearly all these hadiths are going back to Ibn Mas'ud. I read the Ibn Mas'ud. At least going to Kufa, going to Ibn Mas'ud, and where his circle is coming out, and even we are not sure it is from Ibn Mas'ud. And then there are some other caveats and also some doubts or questions earlier in the Mu'tazili school of the Basra, there were some people which raised some challenges. So the conclusion is this: most probably there is not, these hadiths are not right, and not only that, most probably there is no miracle of Shaq al-Qamar, and this verse is not reporting to that, because there are some other points. You can say hadiths are not right, but still maybe they even happen. We don't have correct hadiths from it or distorted hadiths, but it goes further. And this is a good book. And look, I have to say something is this. This is a problem we are getting. Look, Allama Tabatabai didn't find time and didn't do any hadith study. Awai Jawadi Amuli coming after these years, 80 volumes. I think the hadith of the book of him is mostly commentary on Mizan. Didn't push it forward. Look, and I think a 22, 3-year-old guy, I think he maybe Hozavi is doing it. And I think I'm a little bit critical. There is some problem, some tendency in Shia community, Sunnism, the worst too, that we sometimes make our scholars when they're good. We have some also experiences and the head of imams, and then we think everything they say is the final word, and they say the truth, nothing but the truth and the whole truth. And then and then that's also becomes sometimes, and the methodology of research also is one person cannot write commentary. It must be a group, and then it must be really divided, and it must be also critical, and it must use also the techniques and going through that. And this book, I think it's great. Honestly, I've done some stuff. I mean, I was just reading it. So, but I want to. So I'm saying this should come because I usually have avoided saying this kind of stuff when I'm talking English because the audience are non-Iranian. But I think this exists more or not less or the same level also in the non-Iranian Shia community. We need new scholars, new thinking, new doing, and new attention. Okay, let's see what's going on here. Look, one. Yeah, to see to strength of it, if you go to what we have, to the earliest commentaries which we have, which Muqattal ibn Sulaiman, and actually for the Hikmah also discussion, I went to that. Muqattal ibn Sulaiman again is mentioning that. And then as you will see, very often they discuss this Shaq al-Qamar with the event of Dukhan in the 10th verse of Surah al-Dukhan, which, okay, let me see if I can have the ability show it to you that too, because that's also important. Okay. Okay, because I forgot to put. Okay, look, the verse. You see, the verse 10 says, فَارْتَقِبْ يَوْمَ تَأْتِيَ السَّمَاءُ بِدُخَانٍ مُبِينٍ. And then again, look, this, if you look at the translation, it says, then watch for the day when the sky will bring a visible smoke. Okay, again, the question maybe is it past or future? Again, the appearance of this is an event in future, in the end of times, but it's not a miracle. At least what your understanding of this verse is not a miracle. And then you will see some of the early discussions were discussing this, and Shaq al-Qamar together in Shaq al-Qamar. And then the first question was that whether these happen in future or past. And then generally the idea of this must be in future and that must be in the past in Shaq al-Qamar. But then it seems the Mas'ud circle start to claim this is in the past, the smoke. And then gradually, in Shaq al-Qamar also, gradually you see the idea of miracles start to come up. Okay, let me go back to where we were. So look, I don't have time to go through that. This gentleman have looked all the narrations to Sunni books and which are the sources, because I want to go to our main topic here. I need to go a little bit faster. And then you see all are listed, but first list some of the early doubts, which are actually it seems some of the Shia scholars and especially Mu'tazili inclination, like School of Baghdad, have some questions too. But we see Mawardi narrating from Hassan al-Basri that Shaq al-Qamar is related to Qiyamah and the second nafkha, and is not related to the time of Prophet. Sheikh Tusi also reported from an Hassan al-Basri. It doesn't say his opinion, but narrates Hassan al-Basri opinion, that this is Hassan al-Basri says. And then they list some other people which they have the same view. Okay, then some of these adding more, some of the rational disputes, which I think some of them are interesting. And then the author has some sections at the end. So, first you look to the hadiths, you may reject the hadiths, but still may say maybe the miracle happened. And the appearance of Quran doesn't say anything miracle, and then we'll see the rest of Quran too. I tried to do this in 10 minutes. Look, what it was interesting how maybe some critical open mind were there. For example, Abu Bakr Aslam, he died just near the death of Imam Reza, so companion Imam Reza. He said Shaq al-Qamar hasn't happened yet. It will happen in future. Because the meaning of the word of God in Shaq al-Qamar is that in the end of times, in the time of Qiyamah, the moon would split. And then he adds, this is the kind of rational argument. If it had happened in the time of Prophet, it wouldn't be hidden to the people of the world. And then this would become, Shaq al-Qamar would be very manifested and will become mutawatir. Okay, and Amri, because this is very interesting thing, and everybody would repeat it, would say it. Yeah, look, one of these things is the Sunnis. Some of the scholars say is mutawatir, even Aghay Jawadi Amuli, which is not Shia, the Sunnis. Then the Sunni scholars, which are very accurate in this kind of categorization, say, okay, it is not mutawatir, but it goes. Which Aghay Jawadi Amuli in the second and third lecture of this added. First day is mutawatir, and then said, no, okay, they say he's not. Well, we can say he's mutawatir. So both him and Allah mutawatir accepted that. But you have to see, maybe so I say some of the stuff which come later too. Look, this hadith is not in history books, first. It is not in early narrations. You don't find them everywhere. And then you don't find, except you have it from Ibn Mas'ud's circle in the Kufa. If that is the case, this is so big miracle, so big miracle, that you must have it in other chain of narrations, other cities, you have them. Nobody has said, I was there. And nobody has come believing. Which you see, still the Quraysh people are get converted to the Prophet, because even you look to the verses, it's 4 and 5, we know still Prophet is getting conversion even from Umayyad house, from I think the brother of Aisha was converted. We have son of Amr-As converted. Families were split. You don't have anybody say, I was converted under this huge miracle. Nobody have report. Nobody says anything like that. So I don't want to say everything. Let's the article says, because and other people say. So you see there are some. It's not in history book. It's only from Kufa, and it's only mostly circle of Ibn Masud. And then you see other places which that later on they associate is all come under question. Okay, and then I want to read this guy. This guy for me is very Abd Qutayba, which is famous, narrating from this Nazam. This Nazam was a theologian in Basra. He's always something strange. Every opinion he has is out of the box. And I'm just reading it because I every time I hear this guy and then look, he's very different, and I think he was unique. And one of the unknown people of Islamic civilization. He's really sharp mind, but always something out of the box. Now, Nazam says Ibn Mas'ud has claimed that the moon has been slitted and he has seen it. Although we see even Ibn Mas'ud doesn't say that, it's ascribed to him. And even you see the first hadiths they ascribe to him, they're not talking about miracle. They're just talking whether the event has happened or not happened. And then, okay, here's some arguments. Then he says, one of the arguments says, look, this is such a big event. If people had seen it, they would make the beginning of calendar. They did it, for example, for Amul Field, which was big, but as not as big. And then we haven't seen any poem mentioning it. And then we don't see any, this, the argument I use was this, no kafir has believed in it. We haven't heard any Muslim again arguing with this against those mushrikeen. And Sheikh Mufid has narrated this, and I think Sheikh Mufid is more inclined to this because Jahiz is Mu'tazili, very rational, and then Sheikh Mufid, and Jahiz is close to Nazam, was Basri too, maybe his student. And the Sheikh Mufid, when he's narrating it, is that, and then this author says, yeah, Nazam has given important points. It said, look, people should have remembered it. At least we should hear it. This is such a big thing. It's a kind of miracle, which is much big miracle. And we haven't said any other Muslim said, any other argument says, anyway, nobody converted. And then Sheikh Mufid says some Mashaykh Mu'tazila also denied the al-Qamar, and so on. But okay, this cannot be our basis. And then I don't go to contemporary views, which Uri Rubin and Western ones are doing. And then he reviews everything. Uri Rubin, آقای عیاضی. So آقای عیاضی شناخته شده است. Let's see what he said. آقای عیاضی میگن که
sorry to interrupt you, but
yeah.
Don't forget the timing because you're already about 40 minutes here and you're about to start the second part. I'm sorry, just wanted to give you the timing. Yes.
So okay, I will go faster. So you see, this is the content. But now we have to go see who has narrated these hadiths and what are the chain. And this is, the kind of diagrams they do, the hadith analysis. So you see this Abu Ma'mar, Ibrahim Nakhi is famous, Abu Ma'mar, then from Ibn Masud, and this is the branching, for example, come to Bukhari, Muslim, and so on. So he has gone the author through all these branchings, and then we'll see all end of Ibn Masud and Kufa and some of his students, and some of them without sanad, some of them detailed. So you see, all is being discussed, all the different ways, different pathways, and all being evaluated, and different students of Ibn Mas'ud. And then again, for example, Bukhari, Muslim here, you start here and then ending up on those books is not in the story books. Then you go to another Musannaf, which we use that. Actually, I used Abdul Razak al-San'ani for the one of the previous lecture regarding Hikmah, when I said the earliest tafsirs. Or Sufyan ibn Uyayna. Okay, then all these are mentioned. So really a meticulous work. Nobody had the documents. I don't nobody has. So if we look at hadith, we cannot go necessarily rejected by the content or those rational arguments, but we can go to the lineage and we see whether it ends up who's saying it. And then it cannot be only Ibn Masud know this. If this is the case, other people should narrate it. And then sometimes there are sometimes they get Huzaifa Yaman, or even they try to associate Imam Ali. In all these are discussed. Abdullah Abbas. So overall, you see all the hadiths are later, are problems in it, are not very good. And then let me see some Quranic argument, because you see I kind of, I produce a headache for you guys. But besides Ibn Mas'ud, it goes to any other one. Look, they say, okay, it wasn't Ibn Masud. You go to Anas ibn Malik. But then one of his students narrate this. But if somebody like Anas ibn Malik narrate this, but many people should narrate it. These are all modern techniques of hadith studies. And I think we should do that. You cannot that. Okay, Imam Ali, because it's important. And these are all Sunnis, okay? And then there's some early books like Abdul Razak Tabari, they have different narration about al-Qamar. We don't see any about Imam Ali in those early books, like Abdul Razak Tabari usually collect everything regarding Quran, because this is regarding Quran. And we said there is nowhere in the history books. So history people are not aware of this. And then you feel now, for example, Ibn Ashab doesn't say it. None of the history books say it. Though two later one ascribing it to Imam Ali, but again, all this discussed. So I'm saying all the hadiths are under question, but I want to go to the other type of argument. Look, these are even Zayd ibn Ali, even the book. Okay, for example, this is interesting. I think is this narration because is of the other member of our community, Dr. Ansari. Look, for example, there is a book Zayd ibn Ali. They ascribe him with that, but the whole book ascription with Zayd ibn Ali is doubtful. You know, غریب القرآن منسوب به زید ibn Ali بتردید منتیج علی is definitely is a text old and made up. Dr. Ansari says, look, definitely this book is not related to Zayd ibn Ali. So there is a hadith in that book. Somebody narrates to Zayd ibn Ali that this Shaq al-Qamar happened. Imam Sadiq, which we have to go, okay, I don't want to do the... There is an issue regarding Dukhan. As I said, if anything Ibn Mas'ud said, that's the fact. Look, this is the hadith. We said before, we saw most of the reports from different Sahaba are related to narration from Ibn Mas'ud. And regarding other people, none of them seems correct. And those which narrated Ibn Mas'ud is mostly the oldest one. It seems from somebody called Abu Zuha from Masruq as Ibn Mas'ud. And then what they said is that few events have happened before. One is al-Dukhan, one is al-Rum, wal-Qamar, wal-Anbacha, wal-Lizah. So they are saying 5 events in Quran mentioned, like Surah al-Rum, Walabat al-Rum, al-Arz. These are happened in past tense, not in future. So they have a dispute. But never here it says a miracle. In this narration, Ibn Mas'ud is not emphasizing Shaq al-Qamar, the miracle of Prophet. Okay, maybe you say it was very known and he didn't need to emphasize it, but when there is a dispute, this is past or future. So some people say, and is past means that is really known this is a miracle, because a miracle nobody asks is future or not. Okay, let's go. I'm not going to go to all this because this really is faster down. This part I think is good because some of this is important for the whole lecture series we do. Look, the lecture series we do, we want to emphasize the modern research, modern methodology is done. Not everything has been done before. Not the commentaries are done. Lots of work can be done and should be done. Now, one of the line of arguments is this. This argument, this 5th section, which is near the end, I think is important. The silence regarding this Shaq al-Qamar, except it says, except that some narrations from Ibn Mas'ud, which is amplified, but it's all from Ibn Mas'ud, and the other ones we saw is later or doesn't match or is really later people ascribe the same thing to them because exactly the same wording or something like that. There are some dots is there. One is a silence of Quran, because we have other surahs of Quran which mushrikeen request Prophet to bring signs. And then, for example, Surah al-An'am, which is a later surah, and the mushrikeen have swear, if God sends a sign, we will believe. God doesn't argue with them. Okay, I send you a sign you didn't believe. So, you know, and then, for example, again, for example, in another surah, Taha, 133, when his prophet is asked why he doesn't bring a sign, the answer is that Bayyanatun ma fi suhuf al-ula, hasn't come the evidence in suhuf al-ula for them. So is never Quran also referred to this. You know, in the punishment of Ad and Samud, which people haven't seen, maybe Ad, Samud, they see many times mentioned, many references there. So generally, Quran is silent. And then generally, Quran also doesn't look... I cannot go. Quran doesn't clearly talk about a really tangible miracle like that. So if it was, I think it could refer, it could use as argument, is not, and Quran very often says it something and say it again. One other big challenge is this Shaq al-Qamar was only in Kufa, and Mian companions of the Mas'ud was there. Then although they later on ascribed to Ibn Abbas, Ibn Umar, Malik ibn Anas, and Ali ibn Abi Talib, but you see all of them is problematic, and the number of the narration of the Mas'ud and his group and is much huge, and Ibn Mas'ud even himself even we are not sure he has said it, because it doubtful he would said it, is a circle. And then we don't have any imams, hadith from imams, Shia sources. And then there is, as I said, there are some ascription to Imam Ali and Imam Sadiq, but we saw they're not right, and the three of them is discussed. So, okay, I think that's enough for our discussion. And then, so the conclusion is, the author is this: all these riwayat root in the narrations related to Ibn Masud doesn't seem authentic. And then even Ibn Masud doesn't talk about miracle, just say Shaq al-Qamar is it even happened past this. The same for Dukhan, which Dukhan, I think we doubt it for now, but Shaq al-Qamar, okay, at least we can accept. And then it's the author himself was not siding with the partial eclipse, because he didn't have those examples which we had it. For example, the eclipse, we said partial eclipse of 614, which is time of prophet, but he thinks mostly maybe, okay, this Ishaq al-Qamar is related to event of end of times. Okay, I know we don't have time. I try to manage it, but I made it shorter. But there is one thing else I want to say still, is about the books of Enoch. Look, I will be very fast. These are a little bit among odd books of Apocrypha. It is not sacred scripture for any Christian churches except Ethiopic Church. So Ethiopic Church, in their canon, this book is included. It is in their Bible. But Ethiopic Church is important for Islam because some of the terminology regarding Christianity in Quran is really have root in Ge'ez language. And then, Muslims went over there. So, I mean, also this book later on, other translations in other languages, Hebrew was found. But the point is that they didn't consider that book as sacred. Look, some book maybe good. Maybe Allah Malisi wrote something, but it's good. Maybe I keep it. For example, Mafatih al-Janan, maybe I keep my home. Every house have Mafatih al-Janan. But Mafatih al-Janan is not scripture. And then the only thing I want to pay attention is, look, for example, the verse start, Enoch is most probably Idris, the words of the blessing Enoch, which he blessed the elect and righteous who will be living in the day of tribulation when all wicked and godless are to be removed. And the story, I don't want to go through that, is chapter 1. But the events is apocalyptic, at this end of time, the same way. Look, for example, and an eternal God will tread on the earth, even on Mount Sinai, appear in the strength of his might from heaven, and all shall be afraid, and the watchers shall shake, and great fear, trembling shall seize them to ends of the earth. This watcher, let's put it aside, and the earth shall be wholly torn apart, and all that is on the earth shall be destroyed, and there shall be judgment all. So you see, you have themes of end of times, and this prophet is arguing or writing or telling them, guys, it's done. But the only thing is that he's talking with the elite, talking with the righteous. Okay, so, and then he wants to, now they use their kind of, we said, natural theology, by looking to events of the nature and judging or accepting that, okay, end of times will come, hereafter will come, rising will come, there is God over there. I would just see a taste of it because we don't have time to go it. This is again previous lecture. So observe everything that take place in the sky, how the lights do not change their orbits, and the luminaries which are in the heaven, how they all rise and set in order, each in its season, proper time, and do not transgress against their appointed order. Consider the earth and give understanding to things which take place on it from start to finish, how steadfast they are, how none of the things on the earth change, but all the works of God appear to you. Behold the summer and the winter, how the earth is filled with water, cause and dew and rain lie in it, and so on. So, it lists many wonders of the nature. And once people reflect, we have something type of this Quran too, and this is the type of wisdom which at least the argument is, if we assume that verse now means partial lunar eclipse, not miracle, not an event happen in a future, because of the second verse a little bit contradictory on it. They must have seen in a verse. But then this is the kind of event you can look at it and extract information. But I have to be fair. I think there is one other strong argument, and then we go back to our slide and then go to the new lecture. I think there is still a strong argument against solar eclipse too, because they are talking sehrun mustamar. Partial solar eclipse, I don't think will raise that kind of respect. I mean, you can say in yara ayatan yurizu, they don't react. They don't get the real conclusion. Like, I see people are dying every day, but I don't live as the way I may die tomorrow, or at least sometime. But I would say that that is sahran mustamar. Or solar eclipse, because Arabs and Semitic people from 1,000 years were aware of this celestial phenomena. I don't think Prophet timed it and surprised them, and just the time, and then suddenly solar eclipse happens, lunar eclipse happens, they got off guard. Using the word Sahran Mustamar means something really more to the miracle or something Prophet has done. I mean, either we have to disconnect verse 1 and 2 and take Inshaq al-Qamar end of times, and then coming back saying the second verse is separate, and is generally saying whenever we show them, they say they don't accept Sahran Mustamar, and most probably the ayat is either verses of Qur'an or the sign of nature, but it's not related to any specific event which they saw and reacted to it. Or we have to go back to the miracle one. So I'm saying the Sahrat Mustamar doesn't fit very well with, in my opinion, with the partial lunar eclipse. But I think the hadiths and some events of miracle doesn't go well too. Then the other option is that taking Inshaq al-Qamar to event like the Iqtarab as-Sa'ah to something in hereafter, and the second verse is a new start. And so generally, look, anything you show them, anything you talk to them, any argument, for example, anything in nature, they saw any verse we bring, they don't listen, and they call Sihr al-Mustamar. But then what is Sihr? Is it Quran itself, which they said it before? I mean, that's the other thing. We have to go to discussion for Sihr in the Quran, which actually in this other surah, which we go also, there is such a thing. But okay, I kind of stop here our discussion of the previous lecture. I tried to finish the next one faster. Maybe we can do it. Okay, so as I said, we are going to do the verse 20 Surah As-Sad. So I read it, and then I read the English translation. So it's a little bit, maybe frame it, but you can read the Arabic because I want to save time. So I was read English. Be patient over what they say. So look, we will look to the previous verses. Actually, previous verses again is a discussion. Prophet have the mushrikeen, they challenge him, they don't listen to him. So then I will show you that briefly because I want to show one Sihr over there too. But then God tell prophets, okay, be patient over what they say. And now, because I want to bring your attention to story of one of our servants, David. And remember our servant David, the man of strength, yet indeed he was a penitent soul. We disposed the mountains to glorify God with him at evening and dawn, and the birds as well, the birds mustered in flocks, all echoing him in a chorus. We consolidated his kingdom and gave him wisdom. That's the part we're looking. So we consolidated his kingdom and gave him wisdom and conclusive speech. Has there not come to you the account of the contenders when they scaled the wall into the sanctuary, the place David was? When they entered into the presence of David, he was alarmed by them. They said, do not be afraid. We are only two contenders. One of us has bullied the other. So judge justly between us and do not exceed the bounds of justice and show us the right path. And then they tell the story. This brother of mine has 99 EUs, and while I have only a single EU, and yet he says committed to my care, and he browbeats me in speech. So the brother, which is richer, have more 99, arguing. And then look, the word is taking care. It doesn't necessarily say give it to me, but let's give it to me too. I manage it. Look, sometimes the orphans, also Quran says, okay, I will manage the money for you better. You don't know how to do it. I will do it. But the problem is that when they're managing it and we have that kind of control, we don't know what happened to that one sheep. He said, and then David replied, he said, he has certainly wronged you by asking your EU in addition to his own EUs, and indeed many partners bully one another, except such as have faith and do righteous deeds, and few are they. Then David knew that we had tested him. So there is another dimension here. What David's saying in general is right, but as the Hadith says, which I don't discuss this thoroughly, that I'm not going to discuss that. It seems David didn't wait to hear the other side of the argument. I mean, he was off guard. This came appear over there, and then they asked him to put the scene in front of him, and he was so off guard. He immediately gave the verdict before listening to both sides, and then David immediately noticed he did a mistake. Then David knew that we had tested him, whereat he pleaded with his Lord for forgiveness and fell down in prostration and repented. Maybe he was kind of a little bit, I don't know, something about this blessing God gave him has caught on him, and then this God show him, look. So we forgave him that, and indeed he has a station of nearness with us and a good destination. O David, indeed we have made you a vicegerent on the earth, so judge between people with justice, and do between people with justice, and do not follow your desires, or they will lead you astray from the way of God. Indeed, there is a severe punishment for those who stray from the way of God because of their forgetting the day of reckoning. And then it's added, we did not create the sky and the earth and whatever is between them in vain. That is a conjecture of the fakeness. So wow, the fakeness for the fire. Shall we treat those who have faith and do righteous deeds like those whose corruption on the earth? Shall we treat those who have faith and do righteous deeds like those who have caused corruption on the earth? Shall we treat the God very like vicious? This is a blessed book that we have sent unto you, so that they may contemplate its signs, and those who possesses intellect may take admonition. So look, having intellect and taking admonition is also a part of wisdom, or that's what we talk, although the word wisdom is not used. And look, yadabbaru ayatihi, reflecting on the verses, and verses, as we said, could be verse of Quran or nature on their own existence. And al-Albab is, I think we can say it, another synonym for those wise people. And then the fact knowing, I think, khalaq samawat wa earth is not, and we did not create the sky and earth, whatever is between them in vain, is part of the important part of wisdom. Now, look, I want to see the early verses of this surah, which you're not going to do. The verse 5 is also, verse 4 also they mention. Look, وَعَجَبُوا أَنْ جَاءَهُمْ مُنْذِرٌ مِّنْهُمْ وَقَالَ الْكَافِرُونَ هَذَا سَاحِرٌ كَذَّابٌ. So again, here, Prophet is accused of sahir, which is exactly was the situation in Surah al-Qamar. So, okay, what is the sihr? Is it just the attraction of Quran? They feel they're bewitched, or really another miracle happened, like Shaq al-Qamar, or something like that. Okay, but I'm the early verses, because we are not going to go through that, so I'm just saying. Actually, one other thing may be relevant is that in Surah al-Qamar, which is the previous surah, and then we said this surah came immediately after that, we had, as we said last lecture, we had the first more large or complete or comprehensive story of those punishment stories, those peoples which did not listen to the message of the prophets. The Hikmah al-Baligha came to them, they don't listen to it, they don't heed to it, they went to their desires, following their desires, and then God tells their story, not mentioning them. Look again, this surah, which is immediately after that, maybe is revealed, is mentioning Nuh, but now people know the story in detail. The Muslims are early generation. So it's mentioning Nuh, Ad, Fir'aun, Zolatat, Samud, Lut, Ashab al-Aika, and all these group. And Okay, and then this kind of the background of these verses was, which again I kind of go a little bit briefer. But let's see this one, because let's tell the story a little bit simplified, and then I will look a little bit to Al-Mizan too. So this package of verses which you want to discuss, 17 to 28 or 29, usually this block which seems come together or is one story, it's called precope, is the biblical term. So the David precope in Surah As-Sad is the first of 3 prophetic narrative in the surah. The subsequent 2 concern Solomon and Job. Look, this surah which we're discussing, Surah 38, Surah As-Sad, and it seems the name of 9 of prophets came, and 3 of them, 6 only the names mentioned. We have the list when we go to Al-Mizan, but 3 of them, a little bit few verses, some story about them is coming. And the longest one, most comprehensive one, is David, then Solomon, and Job. And the narratives are situated near the start of the surah, after an introductory polemical section against the prophet's opponents, who reject both his status and as a messenger and the Qur'an's claim of divine unicity. So neither accept the unity of God, is still the mushrik, and they do not accept the prophet as messenger. I didn't go through these verses thoroughly, but if you want, you can look at it. Look, these 16 verses, you got some taste of it. So I think we understand it. And then, okay, we read the verses. I'm not going to read it again, but let's a little bit summarize it, what's happening in these verses. So to understand what is intended by Hikmah in verse 20, some analysis of the passage is required. So David has been given a glorious form of worship. Not only he was Abwab, not only he was Zal Ayed, he has Ayed means different hands, different powers, different strengths, which is listed. But mountains and birds sings God praise with him morning and evening. Look, if you come to this translation, we dispose the mountains to glorify with him and evening and dawn. So there are 2 prayers, and Jews still have 2 prayers. I'm not sure how much this is related to that, but it's very probable. But this is Mosaic law, and they go twice. We have 5 or 3 combined, but they're 2. And then the birds mustered in flocks, all echoing him in the chorus. So you not only pray your Jama'ah, for example, people may be behind him with him, mountains and birds are praying with him. And this is a big thing. So that's really is an interesting scene. And then in addition to this, he has been given what he needs to be a just king. That's the idea. We are looking wisdom in the context of power, authority, worldly power, and establishing or implementing positive law. Positive law could be the God law. So you executing it, implementing it. But some of it also is customary law, the law of the people of that civilization, which is not based on scripture. And then he is given mulk, sovereignty, but with Quran says is given wisdom and decisive speech. Now there is very long discussion whether this decisive speech is an instance of wisdom, and wisdom intends decisive speech, and what kind of is this? Is atf or listing an example of it? There are some technical names. I don't think is this Saddam Hussein wants to say decisive speech is a manifestation of the wisdom given to him. And what is exactly decisive speech, Fasl Kitab, is also a different opinion. Or you have wisdom, but decisive speech is a little bit related to charisma too. I mean, to have that charisma, to have that decisive speech, you have to have wisdom. But it's possible decisive speech is something more than wisdom. Because I think in the story of Moses and Aaron, Moses, we cannot say he doesn't have wisdom. I mean, it's very hard, I don't know, to go that line. But some people maybe want to go that line if you go to the Khizr story, but I don't want to go. But then he asked God to send Aaron, his brother, with him because he's better speaker, better communicator. So I'm thinking it's a wisdom and decisive speech is not only he knows to what is good, what to command, but he can seek obedience. He has the charisma to rule, to people follow. He's a commander. He's a leader. Although, again, decisive speech, you have to see how it's understood. Allah a little bit understood it differently. Sarah was saying a little bit differently because what they look. But I think both can be true. So this decisive speech, we come back to it. And these are elements also to being good judge. Because the story which Quran just switch after this about two disputed parties, it wants to show that wisdom of David. You know, you have to understand Quran never says, okay, now I will show you an example of wisdom of David. The stories always work like that. It doesn't say it, but you have to conclude. So the two disputed parties are then introduced who need to scale a wall to reach David in sanctuary. People say they're angels. David is off guard because doesn't anticipate somebody be there. This is a private or secured area. But they calm him down and laid their case before him, and he forgot about that, how they came over there. And then, as we said, one of the disputants complains that has only one EU, and his brother, who has 99, is harassing him to entrust his sole EU to him. David rules in favor of the poorer brother. Upon doing so, realized that it was all it is from God, falls in prostration and repents, because I think he didn't follow the fairness rule of the judging, listening to both sides before giving the verdict. He kind of, it was so drastic case, he was off guard. He immediately gave his verdict, but it wasn't, I mean, maybe right, but you have to wait. God accept his repentance and I think he must be some boasting, some feeling in him. I have all this blessing. God a little bit humble him. God accepts his repentance and reminds him of his duty as God's appointed ruler of the earth. This vicegerency, Khalifa, is also important. And now David's decisive speech in verse 20 should probably read. Yeah, this is the argument which I'm not necessarily I agree, but this is, as Sahaba Hussein wants to say, decisive speech should be probably read as epi-exegetic elaboration of how his hikmah was realized. It could be, you know, to have decisive speech, you need to have hikmah, but I think something extra. But we know that hikmah and speech and mau'izah are connected in Quran. Admonition is there. So in some sense, but again, Hikmah maybe is understanding that admonition, or in one sense, comprehending or implementing admonition, or the other side itself, sometimes the admonition itself is called Hikmah. The saying is sometimes called Hikmah. But no matter what, so but when in the future, after this verse 20, which the word Hikmah came, and Fasl Khitab, decisive speech has came, when David judges the case brought before him by the two disputants, with his decisive speech, his judgment illustrates his hikmah, which we agree. Look, Quran used the time. Quran could list many of other judgments of David, which were wise and good and interesting. Like we have that issue of, for example, I said a couple of times this, the judgment of two ladies comes, say this is our child. Each claim the child is theirs, and then this, it seems, have come by Solomon, for Solomon. Although we said about Imam Ali, but it seems related to Solomon, the David's son. And then Solomon says, okay, at the end when none of them back off, said, okay, I will split the child and give you half of it. But then the true mother backs off, and then Solomon notices who's the true mother. Okay, this kind of judgment, which is really shows the wisdom, could be listed in Quran, but Quran has targeted two targets the same with same arrow, same. It gives an example, but also gives the one which David, because he could give ordinary example, but this also shows that, okay, wisdom of David, anything you have, he has, we all have, is all from God blessing, and we should never forget that. So in the story has two important dimensions: wisdom of David, but also lesson God give to him and all of us. And then it says further support in the favor of this interpretation is that the combination of decisive speech, wisdom, and settling disputes seems to be Quranic, revoking a pre-Islamic logmanic term. Look, yeah, this is, as I said, the Arabs have some ideas of the virtues and what kind of a sheikh or wise person, a leader should be. And then we go to the chapter for Luqman, chapter 31, we discuss this more. But this combination of wisdom and decisive speech was needed for the one who was to judge, to be qazi, to hakam, the one who was to rule. And then usually the sheikhs of a tribe must be Abu Talib or Abdul Muttalib or anyone like that, must have that ability to, although there was some lineage, some heritage or some rules of leadership, but it wasn't always like that, you know. So there was some selection too from elders. Elders means experience, wisdom, usually. You know, the white beard usually was the sign of that. But so it seems Quran is referring to something which agreeable, understandable by the audience. And then he have one example by Bint Wasima poem, which it seems is pre-Islamic. Although, anyway, as I said, there are always questions, some of these poems, whether they're influenced or edited after Islam. Some definitely authentic. This one, I don't have any reason to know yes or no, and maybe I didn't need not to raise that question, but it's interesting. It's because, you know, you feel it's sometimes matching too well, but it maybe was the case. So this Bint Wasima, and then very often the ladies, when you have poem from them, are mourning the death of their father or brother. There were classic types of poetry, and then a style, even sections or like that. And then as a part of that poem, because we don't know, we know it's the one close kinsperson after that family person of that Ben Wasima, but most probably his father must be older. And then you see it is listed, those three attributes is somewhat is listed. So look, he said he was such a person. I find he found him the refuge of widows. So he was a leader of the tribe. The widows are supported by him, the guardian of orphans, and the repeller of obstinate foes. Has, when mutual faults were revealed in a quarrel, with the tongue of Luqman, the son of Ad, and decisiveness of his wise speech, the fasl khutbatihi al-Hakimah. So his speech, which is wise, and the decisiveness, it would restrain them. So if there's some people start to argue and quarreling, is near fight is happening, he could talk them, persuade them, calm them. It would restrain them after mutual pushing and pulling in sound judgment. Hukuma. You know, honestly, there are some elements this poem make me as really the author knows about the Quran. You know, I don't want to be. Sahaba Hussein didn't raise any question. Don't want to play too skeptic. But if we accepted this, which I think there are other evidences, and what he said is not wrong. You know, we have some ideas that Arabs have about the virtues, pre-Islamic virtues they consider for the leaders to should have. Helm was on it, but what it really helm really Arab leaders should have. So Abu Sufyan have helm, but you know, helm was somehow cunning. He was able to keep his anger inside himself and do the smile and go forward and then put the dagger later on. But putting it aside, I think the combination of decisive speech, wisdom, and to be able settling the dispute, to be good judge, is common. And look, even today, I mean, I may be digressing, but let me, I think we can finish this time, even, maybe on time. One digression I say, look, one of the problems Iran has after revolution, they thought any faqih could be very good ruler. Okay, things are not so simple. And even in old times, they know. So every muhaddis doesn't become faqih, and every faqih by himself doesn't become ghazi. You know, fiqh is something like it's theoretical. I know it in the paper, and a derivation of some law of from a text is a very different skill to be judged and to recognize who's lying to you, who's treating you, who's telling you the truth. You know, I give you one, and then a ruler. Islamic civilization know that. Look, Hanbalis, which were dominant, but they have Mulli Naqli or Hadithi mentality, which they only memorize the Hadiths and know lots of Hadiths. Despite they didn't like Hanafis, they let Hanafis become judge. Because Hanafis, despite they know the hadiths, but they have more rational mind, and they're more going a little bit farther than just knowing the hadiths, going to that fiqh direction, and then because they have the argumentative or derivation and making the law, because hadith per se is not the law. Hadith, that's we don't get the, for example, Risalah Amaliyah by manual of hadith. Those who thinking the manual of hadith can make even Risalah Amaliyah doesn't know how the law works. Because law must have covering all the things happened or will happen or not happen. It must be general. But even that's not enough. You need to be practice of be judge himself. Being judge is very different. And then I give you one example. And then being judge is also different from being faqih, and judge different from being ruler. So these are different abilities must be combined, and that mistake happened. One example I give is recognizing who telling you the truth, who's not in you, who catching it is complicated. One time, it is a digression study. There was one psychologist, Dr. Laura, who was a lot in the radios in the when I early came here, 1990s. It was Jewish. She was Jewish too. A mother come complain about her daughter, and we were listening, and we say, "Oh, what a bad daughter this daughter is." I was looking, oh, for mother and not. But this doctor on the radio recognized something is wrong, and with two questions, she could pull it out. I don't know, maybe the background search was there. She could pull it out. The mother and the parents are problematic because, which I didn't notice at all is coming, because they had another daughter, the younger or elder, that was the favorite daughter. So all the attention was going to this other daughter. The second daughter which the first one they come for it, was left neglected. So this kind of judgment doesn't come just by reading the text. You need to have a good psychology of mind, reading people, and this is a good judge has it, the judge, at least the old traditional way. So these are the skills David has as a good ruler. And I think this part Sahab was saying is the right track. I agree these are, and then let's go to kind of complete the argument. So I was a digression. David's ability to judge the brothers' dispute are a demonstration of his wisdom. I agree. And then the combination of wisdom and decisive speech and all also help him to be good ruler. So the poorer brother complains that richer one is harassing him to hand over his loan EU ostensibly to be kept under care of the richer, but with the obvious fear of misappropriation. That David, look, the sentences of David's are interesting, even if you look at Arabic. David declares that as business associates frequently violate each other's rights. Look, his judgment, his sentences were correct. Because in the wrong condition he did it, he rushed through it, he sometimes missed the main idea. Look, his verse, look, this verse has lots of verbs which later on in Islamic fiqh become just transactional words. قالت لقد ظلمك بالسؤال نعجتك إلى نعاجه من كثيرا من الخلطاء. So this means partners. Many of the partners ليبغي بعضهم على بعض. So indeed many partners bully one another. And so this is issue of partnership and so on. And he's not against partnership, he's not against the business, but he says, okay, this is a common tendency. And very often you see businesses fall, and the people start with sharaki, and one of them have to left, or selling it, or pushed out, or he cannot continue. So, these all things happen in the business. So let's go to the continuation. Okay. So David declares that his business associates frequently violate each other's rights, particularly as is implied where there is such a wealth and power gap between the rich and poorer parties. That's the problem. The poorer one, the wealthier one, the powerful one, despite his wealthier and powerful, and maybe doesn't need more, but become more aggressive. Usually that side have the ability to push or lean on the other side, and then that's usually happens. The richer brothers should not have demanded the two enter into a partnership. Yeah, that's actually the case. The other brother kind of said, okay, this is your ship, but give it me to manage it. Like the inheritance, happens. Then look, one is the important thing is that one of the methodologies which a modern scholarship does, and then we look this surah as unity, as a thematic unity. Surah is the border. So sometimes we have to look what is the theme of the surah. What is the verses before and after? Even in the last chapter, we a little bit did it, not fully in this chapter. In this chapter, power and mulk is an important part of the surah. And previous chapter was more to the punishment of the different people which didn't listen heed to the message of God, the Hikmah al-Baligha. This surah, which may become really after the previous surah, is talking about the prophets with authority and their success, or what happens to other people. And then you see David, so power is the central theme, which is judging as an example of power. I mean, some guy like Foucault thinks many of the relationship of power relationships, even marriage, or all they place everything in that kind of frame of good or bad. But here you see David is introduced as a temporal ruler with dominion, mulk, verse 20, who has been made vicegerent in the earth, Khalifa, verse 26. And maybe this issue of mountains and birds coming to him is part of his vicegerency. So he has some responsibilities, just more than ruling people. We have to Solomon inspecting war horses and praying for a dominion, mulk. So again, this issue of mulk, authority. And then it must be based on a wisdom. At least when God gives you this authority, you must be deserving it. And deserving means wisdom and fasl khitab. And the likes of which will never be seen again. So Solomon requests the mulk, which nobody have seen something like that. And David and Abraham, Isaac and Jacob are described as being possessed of strength. Ulul Aidi, which David also himself has said Zal Ayyad. So this also the theme. So judgment, ruling is related to power. David thus bases his judgment on his experience of human nature. And this is a little bit different. Look, so what he concludes, and that's the important part, and a little bit matches what we have last chapter, but especially when we looked at the book of Enoch. What David is doing is not scriptural, is not based off revelation. Look, revelation, proper revelation. In one sense, everything we do, every idea coming in mind is based on revelation. If a mathematician, even atheistic mathematician, discover a theorem, maybe it's a kind of insight which comes from God or something like that without the guy knowing. But putting it aside is a conscious revelation. He's not, the whole scene doesn't show that he's in communication with God. He's doing it himself. And in the middle of it, he noticed he did wrong and he prostrate on the ground. So all his judgment, all his actions, and many of the other actions of Imam Ali are not based on revelation. And never they argue, okay, you are the guilty because I just got a revelation from Jabrail said you are the guilty. No, the techniques they use, even Imam Ali, or that technique of dividing the child with the sword, is the techniques that is a common non-miraculous techniques which explicit makes explicit or make clarify the situation for everybody, and it can be used as some procedure in some courts anywhere. I mean, police has, the tricks here. Somehow they play game, good cop, bad cop, lying to get the extraction out. So look, this is the part of wisdom which David has. By being righteous, the wisdom is given. Actually, that's our idea is generally, but that's the point. Okay, let me go faster. He reasons that normal human behavior indeed many parties abuse gaply one another is such that otherwise legitimate business arrangements may become oppressive. So he has a kind of induction. He observed his wisdom is that his experiences of human living. Maybe they didn't do it when in the caves were, but usually even I think they would do it, humans living in the caves too. But as far as civilization come, the ownership came, and then you see this business arrangements, property ownership came, these kind of things happen. And so he has the wisdom to do that, to judge it and notice this situation. And where the circumstances are such that the chance of wrongdoing is elevated, should be avoided. So the government or the ruler should intervene. This is David Hikmah with which the passage earlier characterized him. So the whole example, the argument is that when verse 20 says David has Hikmah, the manifestation is the other story after that, the judgment he gives, the whole arguments he used. Again, we emphasize significant. It is clear David is not receiving revelation or proclaiming scripture when he gives his ruling, but rather this display of his hikmah is rooted in his own experience, reasoning, and sense of justice. David's moral reasoning had a role to play in determining the correct course of action, but this moral reasoning works. Nedaya, which unconscious works when you're righteous, which everybody has. In that part of this kind of wisdom, if you're righteous, we have also hadiths that says if you're righteous, the fountains of hikmah will spring in you. If you do piety and then you do cleaning yourself, this wisdom come to everybody. Now here he has some arguments which a little bit is hair splitting. Let me go over, because he wants to put it whether this kind of David reasoning, we can call it natural morality. The problem is a little bit different, is not maybe morality, but I think it's other side is common sense or natural reasoning. So if you remember, when we're discussing about natural law in the, I think, third lecture, and then we have 3 sense of natural law, which one of them was very close to fitra, or natural morality. And then he decided to use himself, Sarah was saying, said, okay, we are going to use natural morality. Here he says, okay, this is maybe not exactly hikmah in this sense, is ability and wisdom to do something right, but this is still related to some sense of justice, some morality, some good reasoning. I kind of disagree with him. I think still is related to whether the business transaction is done good. It is avoiding zulm and bad, as verse 24 said, he still is a moral reasoning, natural morality. But let's read the other parts, then I will explain if we need to come back here. Look, he calls it, this kind of reasoning David had to do the judgment is called practical reasoning. And then he says, what is Aristotle has called it phronesis, the virtue that enables us want to correctly, deliberately, how to bring about desired moral end. But is it, for example, if I'm running my business or maximizing or making, for example, Costco a good place to people to shop or work or buy, is it that or has some moral dimension in it too? I think it is, because you must have a sense of injustice. We know stealing is bad, is kind of, everybody by fitra knows it. Somehow he feels not right. And then I think this examples was an example of it. This example David handled. But let's see this phronesis, what it is. Maybe it's make it a little bit clear, and then we'll be done. Phronesis is a concept from Aristotle's ethical philosophy that is often translated as a practical wisdom, because we have it in our culture. Hikmah amali. They divided the whole our traditional traditional learning, divided wisdom or hikmah. They call it wisdom or falsafa, philosophy, to practical wisdom and theoretical wisdom, hikmah nazari, hikmah amali. And then sometimes this is called prudence, that has, or maybe even somehow the border with the help. It is one of the intellectual virtues Aristotle discusses in Nicomachean Ethics. And then the key aspects of this is that practical wisdom for action. Phronesis is the ability to deliberate well about what is good and beneficial for living well in general, not just in specific domains. It is about knowing the right thing to do in particular situations. It's different from theoretical knowledge. Aristotle divides, for example, scientific knowledge, episteme, craft, and technical skill like bicycle riding and piano playing as technical ones. Requires experience. This is the part sometimes you see the sheikh or some leader, political leader, have to have age. Unlike theoretical knowledge, phronesis can be learned not from books alone. It requires life experience, maturity, practice in making good decisions. Combined means and ends. The person with phronesis not only knows what goals are worth pursuing, living virtuously, but also discerns the right means to achieve them in specific circumstances. It's context sensitive, connected to virtue. So I kind of, it is this. So what is the hikmah is, I think it is along here, but I think it's also related some maybe social morality or justice. Let me also actually, to make it clear, I'm ending up, I forgot I was going to, let's see the paragraph Allama says, because actually that makes a good ending. It would 2 minutes. Okay, why? Okay, sorry. Surah. Okay, look, so let me, I just go from previous verse, which I go just to two verses, previous verse of the first verse 20, which is about hikmah. وَالطَّيْرَ مَحْشُورَةً كُلًّا لَهُ أَبْوَابٌ. I mean, there are some things in Arabic wording which I didn't use. The word abwab is used here, and the previous verse regarding David itself. Uh, uh, Allah translate these birds returning to God, to him, capital him. But then he says, which Sarah was saying, and says these birds coming to him, and then they flocked to him and then pray with him. People understood like that. But Allah says possibly him into him, lahu refers to David rather than God, although that is unlikely. So here Allah thinks and the birds flock together, Mashuratan, all turning to him. I think this is a little bit then how it's hard to see how it would be some blessing or virtue for David. So birds must somehow come into him, but this is not important. Let's go to the verse which are concerned. So maybe I shouldn't introduce it. But this one, look, وَشَدَدْنَا مُلْكُهُ وَآتَيْنَاهُ الْحِكْمَةَ وَفَصْلَ الْخِطَابِ. So this is the part is that we have strengthened his kingdom and gifted him wisdom and clear understanding, or clear or decisive. Here they translated clear speech instead of decisive speech. So, and then in the parentheses, they add understanding of speech. So that's different. Understanding of speech, you understand what other people say, when commoners says, when the people come explain their case for you, you understand them very well, even they couldn't explain it well. But usually we understood the way he talks, the way he judges, the way he carries on hands. So it's a little bit different. Allah has, but look, Allah says here, tying shadda means, the first part used for mulko means tying something firm. So tying his strengthening, tying his government firm, and then here tying firm his kingdom is a figure of speech, meaning bolstering his rule and judgment through being formidable, having wealth and soldiers, administering soundly, and the other sorts of things that strengthen the king. And then this is the verse wisdom. Wisdom, hikmah, originates from the root hakama, meaning to discern the truth, to educate. Here it refers to correct certain comprehension of what benefits the human being and is ascent to perfection. Some exegetes say that here it means prophethood, and others say it means the Psalms and knowledge of the religious law. This last part, which is, we saw those commentaries, is really off the chart. They only limit the meaning of the verse because they heard David has Psalms. Okay, they thought Hikmah is a section of a book, but not just a book itself. It's not that volume you put it in the library, you say I have Hikmah. It is manifestation of them, knowing them. So always these commentaries somehow reduce it. But Allah will reject them. There are also other views, however, these views may be all dispensed with. This is right. The meaning he said is more sense than necessarily prophethood or a section of psalm or knowledge of religious law, which is limited understanding. But they here in clear understanding, he has a little bit different view. Clear or fasl khatab. Clear understanding of speech, fasl khatab, is analyzing the words that the person speaks to another and distinguishing the truth from the falsehood in them. So this is the way that I said Dr. Laura did it. For example, he could understood, which could be this. I don't know, because you're a judge, you need to be able to, what they tell you, decide which one is the true one. But I think for political authority, maybe that persuade, that not understanding necessarily other people, they do, but you be persuasive. Your ruler, your judgment is accepted by people. They do not dispute you because they find you wise, reasonable, charismatic. You know, for example, the authority Imam Khomeini had, the beginning of revolution, something like that. It is relevant to judging between two litigants. Either way works, you know, either way works, especially for judging. But and again, Allah connects all these to ability of David to judge and rule. Some exegesis says that Fasl al-Khitab means to speak concisely, neither verbosely nor curtly, so that the listener is neither bored nor uninformed. These are off. Others say the Fasl al-Khitab means saying the yeah, you see what kind of interpretation they have. You're always surprised. Others say the Fasl al-Khitab means saying the expression amma bad. You know, it's an Arabic amma bad they use writing. As for meanings of it is are for what comes next. So you know, you start a topic and then carriage return, start another topic, new paragraph, amma bad. Then they said this Fasl al-Khitab means amma bad because it seems somewhere they listed David was the first person to use this expression. So, you know, we have some kind of commentaries which really kill the whole verse. I mean, the whole meaning of it. So they say Fasl al-Khitab means David was the first one in the human being's history use the amma bad in his speech or writing. However, the next verse, which is about the two litigants, supports our interpretation, which kind of is close to Sarah was saying, but just you can go clear understanding of speech, either understanding the two disputants very well, or the ability to, when you're giving a judgment, people accept you. They know the basis, they know your experience, and is much more related to be a ruler, because as a ruler, you need to have an authority besides wisdom. Okay, I will stop here. Thank you for your attention, and sorry, take a while if any question or anything.